We're at the Valley of Fire State Park here in southern Nevada, one of Nevada's great state parks, the oldest state park here in Nevada. I'm Becky Hall. I'm the executive director at the Nevada Science Center. I'm here with
Kayla Wolf, the park interpretive ranger at Valley of Fire.
And I'm Dr. Josh Bondi, and I'm the director of research at the Nevada Science Center.
So today we're going to be talking a little bit about archaeology and in the park, and I'll let Josh and Kayla take care of that for you today.
So we'd like to start off with a land acknowledgement to the peoples that call this place home here in southern Nevada. So the Puebloan cultures and the Nuwu or the Southern Paiute. So they're the ones that were the original stewards of this land and are still around today. So we get the benefit of hanging out in their homelands. So you might be asking, what is archaeology? You've heard me talk, if you've tuned into our programs before, I've talked a lot about paleontology. And there is a lot of overlap between paleontology and archaeology. Paleontology is the study of prehistoric life, whereas archaeology,
it's the study of human history through material remains.
so there is overlap because people interact with animals and animals interact with people. So one's not totally exclusive of the other, but yeah, the archaeology is more of the people stuff. So we're, like Becky said, we're in Valley Fire State Park, which is here in Clark County. We're about an hour from Las Vegas and right outside of the town of Overton. So try to get us a start on the archaeology of the park. We have a quick video. So Mr. Krauss, if you wouldn't mind kicking to that. We're here at Atlatl Rock, which is a famous petroglyph site here in Valley of Fire State Park. So in addition to the beautiful petroglyphs up here, there's another surprise we're going to show you once we get up to the top. So we're here up at the Atlatl Rock petroglyph panel. So if you look behind me, the namesake for this panel is the second from the top symbol up there, which is an atlatl below the sheet. An atlatl is a specialized lever arm for helping project a spear-like weapon or spear-like projectile, which is the third symbol down is supposed to be the spear. And so what this story represents, not necessarily sure. This panel has been here for thousands of years, so it was obviously a really important story. You can also see other symbols of sheep, some symbols of Joshua trees. So this is a very important part of the park archaeologically. But if you follow me, there's also another surprise up here. So come across. So as a paleontologist, I have to show off the paleontological part of the story too. On the underside of this overhang, you can see a series of little dimples on the underside of this flat surface. Those are the tracks from a 180 million year old mammal-like reptile. So one of our distant cousins, about the size of a beagle, that was also running up one of these ancient sand dunes when this was a big sand sea like the modern Sahara Desert. Standing here in front of a rock art panel, rock art in Valley of Fire State Park is interpreted to have come from a couple of groups. One being the Puebloan cultures from a little over 1,000 years ago, and from about 1,000 years ago to the recent, more of the Paiute cultures. And both of these groups of people are still around today, so this is their heritage and this is their story. So what happens is, these are petroglyphs. Petroglyphs are different from pictographs, and the pictographs are painted onto rock, and petroglyphs are etched into the rock surface. And so what they were doing is that this is before paper was widespread across the Americas, and so stories were told verbally, generation to generation. And only the most important stories, or those that were of ceremonial purpose, were taking the time to etch into the rock. So you imagine if you screwed up, if you weren't a master artisan, your entire rock panel would be destroyed. And so it took somebody who was a master artisan to come out here and take the time to etch these rocks to tell these stories. So you can see there's a number of different symbols that I'm not going to interpret, but there's a couple that are obvious. So if you look up and to the right here, this is a depiction of a desert tortoise, which was a major food source and is still an abundant animal here in the desert Southwest today. If you look up and over my left shoulder, this is a bighorn sheep, and this was a major food source for people that live in the Southwest and live in the Western United States too. Even up to this day, there's still people go out and hunt these animals. So important stories etched into the stone for future generations to learn. Now, what is the difference between the black and the orange? This is a process called desert varnish. And so as a geologist, I can talk a little bit more about that. So desert varnish is a modern weathering phenomenon. So as these surfaces sit out in the sun for thousands of years, and wind-blown dust comes in. Wind-blown dust that includes minerals that might have manganese in it, iron in it. And so as that material accumulates on the surface progressively gets darker and darker and darker and varnishes. So the darker the surface, the older it is. And it takes hundreds to thousands of years in order for desert varnish to form. And so when they etch their stories into the desert varnish, you can actually tell how old the relative stories are by how dark the etchings are. And so you can tell what are the older stories versus the younger stories. And unfortunately, having people coming into the desert Southwest who might not respect these cultures and etching their own graffiti into the rock surface, it takes thousands of years for these surfaces to heal and can permanently damage the rock art. So when you see rock art, appreciate it. You can take photographs of it, but please leave it alone. All right, welcome back. So just a little bit about the pictographs and about the petroglyphs here in the park. So just to put us in kind of a more scientific context as well, looking behind us at these beautiful red rocks, these are a geologic formation called the Aztec sandstone. So that's the geologic unit that all of those petroglyphs were carved into. The Aztec sandstone represents the fossilized remains of an ancient sand sea the size of the Sahara Desert that existed in Western North America 180 million years ago. And there were dinosaurs running through those sand dunes. Maybe a topic for another day, another story. But today we're talking about archaeology in the park. And so I will let Ranger Kayla take it and show us some cool stuff that's been found here.
All right. Well, people have been using this area for over 4,000 years. And actually, one of the oldest artifacts we have was found by a researcher. Am I in focus here? Are we good? So this would have been a spear point. This is believed to be 5,000 years old. And what's really cool about this stuff that's been found here is that you can actually watch the history of people through their tools and through what they used while they were here. Now, for the most part, when people came through here, it was more for hunting and gathering and camping, not recreationally like we might do. And prior to, so many years ago, people were very nomadic in this area until they started to start farming on their own here. So this one is at least 5,000 years old. And like I said, you can watch the history of people through what was found. So it's a very old spear point. And then one that is a little more recent. Oh, sorry. I guess we'll just pull it away.
Okay.
Which is this one that was found here. So that older one was believed to be up to 5,000 years old. This one might be closer to 2,000 years old. Now, long ago, people were using spears to hunt, and then that transitioned into the bow and arrow in about 500 AD. Now, talking about those petroglyphs from our video, what we noticed at Atlatl Rock is they featured the atlatl, which was a tool that was used to throw spears. So it's very possible that the older point we had might have been on the end of a spear being thrown by an atlatl many years ago. But the Atlatl Rock doesn't depict any bow and arrows, which might make you think that, well, maybe people weren't here after the invention of the bow and arrow. However, we've also found bow and arrow tips and arrowheads. So I can get this one on the very little. Ah, there we go. We got that. All right. Now, people come to the park and find these. It's not just archaeologists that can find things like this. Now, however, if you are visiting the park and you find something cool like this, definitely don't take it home. The best thing you can do is take a picture, get the GPS coordinates, and come to us and tell us about it. It's one way that we can preserve the cultural heritage here and make sure that it's here for many years to come. Other things. Oh, go ahead,
What is this?
yes. So, when you find certain things like, spear points and arrowheads, it's really easy to tell what they are, and you know that it's an artifact. However, sometimes you find things like this, and you assume that it's just a rock. And sometimes even professionals tell people that it's not just a rock and they don't believe us. But this was an ancient seed grinding tool from about 600 to 1100 AD. So they would use this to grind seeds. And we know this because when you look at it microscopically, you actually find remnants of the seeds on there. And also looking at the wear pattern and where it was found can tell you even more about what this was used for. So this is a very old tool, not just a rock. Also talking about how artifacts can help us learn more about history. When it comes to pottery, the pottery that was used in this area originated in Mexico, or the methods of making it. And it originated 4,000 years ago. However, it didn't make it up closer to this area until 150 AD. And that's when we start seeing different types of pottery. I'm good here. So you can see these are two different pottery sherds. Very different textures, very different patterns. So different people would make different types of pottery. One method that would be used would be called the coil and scraping method, which is where they would take coils of clay, coil them up to make the shape of a pot, and use a scraper to scrape it together to make a smooth surface. Now, speaking of scrapers, when they were using scrapers to scrape the pots into their shapes, it wouldn't have been a hard material that they were using, but this is another type of scraper that was made out of rock. Oh, sorry, make sure I get there. Another example of something that was found in the park. So those are actually really great artifacts. They're, you know, pretty intact, kind of large, but sometimes people find a lot of little pieces of artifacts. Grab a few. So if you don't know what you're looking at, it can be hard to tell that these are actually parts of ancient artifacts. These were tools that people were using. So we're likely to have professionals here who can come out and actually tell us what these are. But again, if you find anything out here, take a picture, log its coordinates, and leave it alone.
Yeah, fortunately, most cell phones have a camera and a GPS unit on it. So if you're out hiking, you should probably have a GPS app on your phone anyways. So, thank you for sharing the people story out here. Now, this is actually a part of Southern Nevada that's still used for agriculture today. So the Muddy River flows not too far from here, which is a water source for livestock, for wild animals, and for farms. And so the community of Overton's a farming community not that far from here. So people have been using this area for thousands of years for farming. But because I'm a paleontologist, again, obnoxiously, I have to bring out the fossils. So from Valley of Fire, from the Cretaceous, not the beautiful red rocks behind us. And these red rocks, I should say, since it's getting close to Nevada Day, which is the day that Nevada became a state, is actually Nevada State Rock. And so the red rocks are Nevada State Rock, the red sandstones. But younger than those rocks, which are 180 million years old, we have rocks that are about 100 million years old. And so this is a bone or backbone from a duck-billed dinosaur that our very own executive director has actually been working on cleaning up and describing. So this is just one backbone. If you feel the bumps in your spine, that's this part right here. That's just one of those. So this animal probably would have been about 25, 30 feet long when it was fully intact. We have about 7 different types of dinosaurs, 2 types of crocodiles, 3 types of turtles, lungfish, and garfish, all from out here in Valley of Fire State Park, all from the Cretaceous period. And in addition to the animals, there's also lots of plant fossils as well. So this is a piece of petrified wood. It's been polished up so you can see the rings really nice in there. This is a piece of a tree fern that was growing on the riverbanks 100 million years ago here in Southern Nevada. Other plants that we've found, 3 types of ferns and also magnolias. So this is a part of the world where magnolias do not grow wild. And so if you look behind us, you can see creosote, spiny burr sage, and plants like that. Not magnolias, though. It would take a lot more water than we have today. And I'm going to hand it over to Becky real quick to talk about an activity for those of you who are educators out there.
All right, I want to say. So I like to wrap it up with just something before we get to Q&A, something you can do at home. So thank you, Kayla, for inviting us to this park. If you would like to come, if you're local or from Nevada or nearby, you can come to the park and there is a visitor center. So we're not there right now. We actually are in remote part of Southern Nevada where cell reception and internet's really limited. So you can come visit the park's visitor center where they have some of these artifacts on site. They have dioramas with some of these people that used to live here and hunt here. So come down to the Valley of Fire State Park so you can come visit their visitor center. But with an activity you can do at home, no matter where you are in the world, is make your own petroglyphs, right? So we don't want to vandalize. So here I made an example of one. So kind of like a scratch card you would do with colored underneath. Instead, we're going to be scratching sand off a photo card. So what you need is glossy photo paper, some sand, either from the craft store or your backyard, and some spray adhesive. So you want to spray the shiny side or the glossy side of the photo paper, sprinkle it with some sand or some dirt, and let it dry. And then you can have fun and create your own stories in your own petroglyphs. So again, these are your stories, or maybe an adventure you had or a memory you have. This motorcycles. So then with that, we'll bring Kayla and Josh back over so you can ask them about the park, archaeology, and paleontology.
Sounds good.
Absolutely. We've already got some student and class questions, and if anyone has any more questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll get to it if we have time. So we have a class here in Las Vegas, and this question was also asked by a class in Florida, and they wanted to know, where are the oldest petroglyphs in the state of Nevada?
So,
Go. You got it.
so the oldest petroglyphs from the state of Nevada are actually from near the north of Reno, on the Pike Reservation at Pyramid Lake. And so they were etched into tufa, which is a freshwater limestone. And so those have been dated about 13,500 years old.
And one of the classes, they wanted to know, have there ever been any remnants of like weapons that have been used for like hunting or anything like that you guys have found?
Oh, definitely. So the down here. Oh, where's the other one? Oh, thank you. Yeah, so these that we were showing, these would have been the remnants of tools that they were used for hunting, were used for hunting.
That's very interesting stuff there, and it just goes to show, I mean, they have necessity is the mother of invention there. One of the classes wants to know, how old is the oldest, first of all, it was a two-part question where they wanted to know how and when did they find these petroglyphs? And about how old do they think the Valley of Fire Park petroglyphs are?
Okay, so the petroglyphs, some things will date them back thousands of years. A lot of them were believed to have been made when Plebeians were in the area farming. It was interesting, and they were here from 81 to about 1200. So what's interesting is we have a couple places around the parks where you can find petroglyphs. It's believed that the ones on a trail that's called Mouse's Tank are a little bit newer, but still, at least 800 years old than the ones that are at Atlatl Rock. And that's based on the styles that we find there. So the petroglyphs at Atlatl Rock seem to be more diverse in styles, and some of the patterns there match other rock art that's been found farther north and farther west. So we believe those are a little bit older.
And what are some of the most exciting artifacts that have been found at the Valley of Fire?
Oh gosh, I guess it depends on your opinion. I guess, have you guys ever found anything while out on a dig that was particularly exciting?
I mean, we've found, just in our travels, we found arrowheads that have been made out of petrified wood and things like that. But I think the coolest stuff out here is actually the pottery.
I totally agree.
Well, that's really cool that they can have that kind of snapshot in time. How do the scientists figure out how old the rock art is? What is the process of dating it?
So some of it is based on what is carved in the rock. So for example, if you have a picture of a bow and arrow, well, those weren't really used here until after 500 AD, so that would have been made after that time. If there are horses were introduced to this area until after the 1500s. So then, okay, you kind of date it back to that point. So it's about looking at, what's depicted, how does it relate to what was used at the time. You can also use methods of looking at how the desert varnish has grown back over the carvings and date it that way as well. Am I missing anything?
Yeah, geologically, some surfaces, if you have the right types of rocks, surfaces can be dated looking at how radiation from the sun and from the universe has impacted that. It's called cosmogenic dating. To my knowledge, I don't know if that's been done out here in Valley Fire, but it is another technique to date rocks.
Before I forget, if anyone has any interest in more of these future events, these awesome events with Nevada Science Center, and would like to be on the Nevada Science Center's email list, it's in the chat and it will also be embedded in the video. We had a question from a class that wanted to know, when was the estimated last time that tribes lived out there?
Tribes still live out here to this day. So one of the main entrances into Valley of Fire State Park, you go right through the Moapa Paiute Reservation. So this is still an area that, even though it's a state park today, it's still spiritually and physically important to the tribes of the area and to the people that live in this area, in this region.
Now, if you can explain for our guests here that are from other countries and stuff like that, would this be the same group of people that has just stayed there throughout time, or was there an ebbing and flowing of migration of people?
Okay, there was definitely an ebbing and flowing of migration. So prior to the groups that are here now, there were other groups that it's believed have since moved down towards the northern part of the Rio Grande. And there was a drought in about 1100 AD, which made it very hard for people to succeed. And the people who live here now were able to adapt to that and do well. So, but yeah, there's things that changed over time. Long ago, it was a lot more of a nomadic existence in this area. Because you figure we're going back 4,000, 5,000 years. This area has looked very different over the years. So some stretches of times were wetter and great for farming and living. Others were not so great. So definitely that ebbing and flowing going on.
And the career side of it, if someone wanted to go into archaeology, what kind of subjects would you recommend that they study in school?
I would definitely study. There's all sorts of archaeology books you can get a hold of, especially for any age group. It's one of those popular topics, probably since the Indiana Jones movies. Don't be Indiana Jones; he was a bad archaeologist. But you can learn about archaeology on your own. It's not really until you get to university level that you start taking archaeology classes, and it's actually a major you can get into. As an archaeologist, you can either go on to get graduate degrees and become a professor or a curator at a museum. But there's also jobs that you can get working for land management agencies like state parks or the Bureau of Land Management or National Park Service. And you get to go out and conserve your country's natural heritage using your degree.
That's wonderful. And those of you who are from other countries who want to check that out, more the merrier. We have a question from one of the middle schools here in Nevada, and they wanted to know, is there a large aquifer underneath the Valley of Fire?
There is an aquifer beneath Valley Fire State Park. It's embedded within the red sandstones behind us. But actually the main water source through here is the Muddy River, which you can't see in our frame, but is about, what'd you say, 5 miles that way? Yeah. 5 miles to our east. We're facing east right now as we're talking to you. Other water sources within Valley Fire are the tanks. Do you want to talk about?
Oh, yeah. So parts where the rock can collect water when it rains, those are called tanks. And it is amazing how long they can actually store water. I think just in those nice shady areas where the sun's not evaporating it, but that is a really important source of water. And speaking on that, so the petroglyphs, you find the concentrations of petroglyphs in the park near those water tanks. So at Atlatl Rock, if you explore on there, you can actually find a pretty big one. Nowadays, it's mostly just the bighorn sheep and other animals that use it. But yeah, also end of Mouse's Tank Trail, there is a tank there.
Somebody wanted to know, one of the classes that is joining us from Midwest, and they wanted to know, has anyone ever been caught vandalizing the park? And if so, what are the consequences? Because I know that we touched a little bit on it. If you see the stuff, don't touch it. Like when you're out there, it's, like we say as elementary school teachers, touch with your eyes, just look. And so what are the consequences of that?
The consequences are a citation and a heavy fine, and we have definitely seen it. We've seen people carving into the petroglyphs themselves, which you would think is obvious, don't do that kind of thing. We've also found people just carving into the sandstone, thinking that, it'll erode away, it's fine. It's really not. But the thing to think about it is this is cultural history. You wouldn't go into a museum and write your name on a statue. You wouldn't carve into a painting. Same idea applies here. This is history. I take heavy fine.
But thank you guys for joining us today. And before we go, I have my email in the chat. If you guys have any questions, comments about today's event, would like the recording of today's event. I also have upcoming edutainment guest speakers and virtual field trips. Before we go, Kayla, can you let us know where can we learn more about the Valley of Fire State Park?
Oh, yes. So you could find us online. We are on Facebook and Instagram, valley.of.fire. We also have our main parks website. It's under the parks.nv.gov. Those would be great places. And even better, you could always come visit us. We are open every day of the year from sunrise to sunset.
And there's a great campground out here.
Oh, yeah.
And Josh, if you could tell us where do we go to learn more about the Nevada Science Center, those of us who are new to these events?
Just like Valley Fire State Park, we are on all the social media platforms. So Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And you can go see our previous virtual field trips on our YouTube channel. If you want to support more of these, you can go to our website at sciencecenternevada.org, and you can help kick in and help us continue this virtual field trip program.